Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Your Blank What Now podcast. I'm your host, Marcy Nettles, and I am again very excited to be coming to you with a new episode today with another special guest that has got a tremendous story that I know will absolutely reach out and touch at least one of you, if not every single one of you, and you'll think of someone that you need to share it with. So don't hesitate and go ahead and share this show. Today's episode is going to have the title of You're Fighting Life. What now? So our guest today believes that he actually wants to share, what does it mean to be a leader? Is someone who does what's right without the expectation of anything in return. Those aren't just words that Tom Mancuso lives by. They are ingrained in all that he does and who he is. He has overcome things in life that would break others, losing a limb in an accident, suffering a brain injury, PTSD, alcohol abuse, and even going to prison for DUI. He has used these life events to mold his thinking, to not focus on himself, but to focus on how he can assist others. As a loan officer, he carefully crafts each loan to best serve his clients and to help them achieve the American dream of home ownership. He mentors others to help them to be successful in their work life, but in the end, he really is helping them to be the best version of themselves. Tom continues to give back, helping educate others so they can find personal and financial growth. He's always looking for ways to support others' success. That's the mark of a true leader. And, I learned about Tom through a mutual friend that we have on social media, that when he saw what my podcast was about, and I asked him who I could interview that he knew, he instantly thought of Tom. And so, Tom, I am so excited to have you as the guest today to be able to share your story, because you have a tremendous one that I just knew needed to be shared after you shared just tidbits of it with me. And I loved the way, as you were sharing your story, your perspective changed around the circumstances that you had gone through. Would you mind, and by the way, welcome to the show. We're so glad you're here. But would you mind starting with your childhood, and who is Tom, and what was life like for you as a young boy, and what type of relationship did you have with your father? Because I know you lost him, and so I'm sure that was difficult.
Hi, Marcy. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Yes, so to start, my name is Tom Mancuso. I work as a branch manager with a mortgage company in Arizona. I was born in Chicago, Illinois, moved to Arizona when I was like 8 years old. Parents got sick of the cold weather and moved to Arizona. I have one brother, 8 years apart, great family. My mother was a preschool director for 32 years. My father owned a body shop and like a towing company in Chicago and a body shop here in Arizona, and then ultimately went to work in the car business as a finance director. And so I kind of got into finance and sales at a young age. Like as a teenager, I'd go kind of hang out with my dad in the summertime and spent time with him, in the body shop and working on cars, but also spent time with them around the dealership. And my dad really shared his love of automobiles and cars with me. I will say my dad was like the Mr. Fix-It-All. Like he could just build or fix anything. And I'm really not that way. I can work on cars, but like stuff around the house, I'm not the best. My poor wife is the one that does stuff like that. She's really handy. And so I had a great relationship with him. My dad was always very, very methodical, though. He would teach me things or tell me things, and it was very elaborate. Like, what's the bigger lesson? Like, what's the bigger picture? I'll never forget, like, just to give you an idea of my childhood, I'll never forget, I was like 13 years old, and we lived probably 2 or 3 miles maybe from the mall in Arizona. And I remember I asked him, I want to go buy a squirt gun at like Toys R Us. And he was like, well, how much is a squirt gun? I'm like, oh, it's like $20 or $30. I have the money from chores and babysitting. And he was like, cool. Well, how are you going to get there? I'm like, well, that's where you come in. I'm asking you if you'll take me to the store. And he's like, well, gas isn't free. And he's like, so you should wash my truck in your mom's car and then I'll take you. I was like, what? No, wait a minute. Like I have my like savings to buy the toy. And he's like, yeah, well, you don't want to ride your bike, right? I'm like, no, I can't carry it. He was like, yeah, well, there's other costs involved. And I'm like 13, right? And like this whole lesson, I'm like, this makes no sense to me. Of course, I washed the cars and I went to go get the toy, but it taught me a bigger lesson, right? That just the actual task itself, there's things that need to be built up leading to that, and putting yourself in those situations. And so it was things like that growing up that my dad was very good at teaching me. At a young age, my father served in the military. My grandfather served in the military. That's a very, very big part of my family. Our patriotism, our love for this country. My grandfather came to the United States, was not a citizen, and felt that that was his way to make this his country, and serve this country. And so my grandfather served in World War II, lost his hearing as a cannon operator. And so as a child, between my father and my grandfather, I really saw an interesting perspective. I saw people treat my grandfather, unfortunately, like he was ignorant or not smart. Because he looked like everybody else, right? Until you try to talk to him, would you realize that he had lost his hearing? And most people, because he could speak and he could kind of hear, thought maybe he was just ignorant. And the way people treated him was very unfortunate, but that taught me a lot as a child, not to judge anyone by their character or by what they look like, just because, he may not be able to understand someone or hear someone, but what he had given for that, he always had this huge sense of patriotism that was something that was an easy thing to give up, to serve his country and to make this his country. And so he had told me several times growing up that he would never change, what had happened, and that he had served his country. And so my father continued that, obviously letting me know, the importance of, serving your country, appreciating where you're from, understanding that a lot of other people in the world don't have it as good as us. And so to never really lose track of that. We all have bad days, but really and truly, overall, we have a lot to be thankful for. And so my dad was good at reminding me about that. Even though we're young, sometimes we forget that, obviously. But again, when I was 18 years old, I wanted to join the military. I wanted to follow in my father's and grandfather's footsteps. Had a lot of friends that were joining the military. I was 18 in 1999, to date myself a little bit. So before September 11th, my father really told me that life had changed, the world had changed, and I needed to be, close to my family. And I really never understood what that meant at the time. But obviously, 2 years later, he would get cancer and pass away very rapidly. And so he obviously had a premonition that it was important for me to stay close to my family. My brother's older than me. My brother was off, living his life in California. And so it was important for me to stay close to my mother. So I never did join the military. For years, I regretted that because I lost some friends that went to service and never came back. And I somewhat felt responsible for not being there with them. It was something that I kind of felt like I phoned it in, or took the easy way out. But obviously, ultimately, looking back at things, it was something that made a lot of sense to me, in the long run. But great childhood. Always had fun. We always did great things, a lot of exciting things as a family. My brother picked on me a lot, but it was nice because nobody else picked on me except for him. But overall, a good childhood. I definitely saw our family go through some struggles. We went through some financial struggles. About the time I was going to high school, my parents' business actually went out of business. We went bankrupt. So we went from a really nice big house to an apartment. And that was tough because I went to an affluent school. They didn't want to change my school district because of all my friends and staying with the same kind of group of students. So it was kind of tough, going from middle class family to not really in the same atmosphere as some of the students that went to my school. So that was difficult. It definitely taught me in school not to spoil my children as I get older. Now I'm a father now, and I look back at some of those things, and I look back at how my dad, would teach me and treat me, in ways, even if they were providing things for me, that kind of made me feel like I had to work for it, or gave me that idea on things. Definitely made me feel like I was working for it. And I definitely understood the older that I got, why that was important, and the values that taught me as I got older, for sure.
Oh, that is so good. Your father sounds amazing. I mean, seriously, him and your grandfather combined, it sounds like they really set you up to be able to be in a position to be able to have the change of perspective as you would go along through your years, after your father wasn't here anymore, because you mentioned that he passed away from cancer, 2001, it sounds like.
Yep.
So,
2001.
and yeah, the same year, 9/11,
Yep.
right? And if you had been in the military, then you would not have been there for your mom or for your brother the way that your father would have wanted you to be. So, like you said, it sounds like he had a premonition or some inspired thought from, I would say God myself. But that is amazing. I love that. I love that he taught you ownership and appreciation for the things that you had, and that there was, if someone else was put out to help you get something, then you needed to be appreciative of that and pay what you should pay for your privilege in having them help you, because there's way too many kids nowadays that don't think that way. So I agree. I think it was a great lesson for you.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's like looking back, and now I see how those lessons really were taught and why they were taught. At the time, you really don't see that, right? You kind of have like tunnel vision. And especially as a young, immature, young man, you just want your way. But then you kind of understand how things work out and why things are the way they are.
Yeah, most definitely. So after you lost your dad, I'm sure that there was more that played into it, including the fact that you had initially wanted to go into the military and then did not because of your father's wishes, and then losing him kind of put you into a position to where you were kind of spiraling. Can you share with the audience, what the next years were like for you when it comes to how you were dealing with life and how alcohol played a part?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I was very successful. I got in the car business when I was 18. Didn't, didn't go the military route. Got in the car business. Wanted to follow my dad's footsteps, at least business wise. I love finance, love sales, love people. That really is the bottom line. I just love people. That we can learn so much from others, and so I really do have an appreciation for people in the world. But I was very successful in sales. Unfortunately, things took a turn for the worse, obviously losing my father. At the time, my brother really wasn't present in the family. And so I financially helped my mother out. And so my life turned from, all these wins, being very successful in business, to 21 years old. I had just bought a house, had, a lot of great things, physical, possessions, material possessions, but now all of a sudden I need to help my mom out financially. My mom was a preschool director. As you know, teachers, educators don't get paid a lot of money. My dad was the major breadwinner. My dad had gotten sick and diagnosed with cancer and couldn't work for 6 months. Then he passed away. So really that 6 months, they burned through all their savings, insurance costs, medical costs, tons of medical bills. It really gave me an understanding of like the medical world, and like medical bills and just the cost for medical care, is something that, unless you've dealt with it, like we don't put, that together. And so my life definitely took a turn for, very much from like wins and successes to just trying to survive. And I'll never forget, I mean, I wanted to be strong for my family, especially my mother. And like looking back, I'm sure she knew, obviously it's my mother, but like my father's funeral, I didn't want to cry, right? I thought I was going to be the tough guy. I wouldn't cry, which was ignorant, because I didn't cry at his funeral, but I cried for years afterwards. Like a lot of young people, I would party and go out and have a good time and things like that. But that then turned from I would go out and party and have a good time with my friends, to I would find myself like in the backyard or sitting out in front of the house party, like depressed and crying and like listening to music and just missing my father. And so while I didn't cry at the funeral, I would cry so many other times. And I just really had a problem coming to acceptance with that. There's 5 stages of grief, and man, really acceptance was just really tough for me. My dad was my best friend. And, even today, it still chokes me up. My dad was my best friend. He taught me so much about life and just everything. And just suddenly he's just gone. And, we all think, I used to think I'm going to live to 100, die in a nursing home. I thought up until that point, my dad's going to live till he's 100 and, die in a nursing home. And And that's just not how life works. And so it was a very, very tough, situation. And I continued to use alcoholism as a crutch for my depression and my sadness. And unfortunately, I just started being self-destructive to my life. Unfortunately, I was very good at my job, and I was very successful at sales. So I had the money to support that habit, and my work then became just a supporting mechanism to my habit. And so I had gotten a couple of DUIs. I wasn't the type of person that would drink every day. I was like a binge drinker. I wouldn't drink every day, but like every other weekend or once a month, like we're going to tie it on. We're going to close the bar down. We're going to stay up all night drinking at home. Like it was bad. And so I got a couple DUIs in the following years. My first DUI was at 22 years old. Second DUI was like 23 or 24 years old. And then ultimately I would get a third DUI. Luckily, I never hurt anyone, driving intoxicated. And I'll be honest with you, if I had a DUI for every time I drove drunk, I mean, 3 would be just a drop in the bucket, as a lot of people, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
But just a very reckless, my life was kind of in shambles. For me to put the public and our community at risk is just very, very unfortunate. And again, I would go serve my time, everything. But the third DUI I would get about a month later, I would be in a tragic motorcycle accident. I love to race cars or motorcycles. I started doing that in my 20s. Had a motorcycle, a couple motorcycles actually, and we would race motorcycles like on a racetrack, like road race motorcycles. And September 5th, 2009, it's a Saturday, like noon. I'm just taking the motorcycle around the block, just changed the oil in the motorcycle. I'm gonna race it that Sunday. And something happens that I'm not prepared for. I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt, no helmet. I'm going below the speed limit in my neighborhood. The throttle somehow gets like pinned. I don't really remember 100% how that happened or why that happened, but the throttle got pinned, and I guess I freaked out. And I'm sure I would have laid the bike down normally, but there were apparently 3 children on the sidewalk on the street that I was driving down. And so instead of laying the bike down, I tried to ride it into like a retaining wall and bail off of the motorcycle and just kind of let it crash into the wall. I'm assuming because I've laid bikes down on racetracks and they fly apart and little pieces of metal can turn into bullets pretty quick. And so at least I had the wherewithal to try to avoid the children. And so I would try and ride the motorcycle into the wall and bail off of it. When I bailed off of it, the frame or the wheel grabbed my leg and sandwiched me between the bike and the wall. It would sever my leg like halfway up my shin and cut my leg off, basically. I wasn't breathing. And luckily, one of the 12-year-old children, like 3 12-year-old children, saw it happen. One of the children had his mom's cell phone, and even seeing such a tragic accident, knew right away to call 911. And I used to live in like a northern part of like Phoenix, Arizona, where wasn't a lot of traffic. So probably the only witness that is going to be in that area for a while. So definitely lucky. I mean, you can call it luck, you can call it God, you can call it whatever you want. Definitely, Marcy, you made a reference to angels earlier, and that's what it was. I mean, the things that happened following the accident is nothing but a miracle. So the one of the children calls 911. About a minute after that, paramedics are on their way. A passerby was a Vietnam veteran with his wife driving to his son's house, I guess was in my neighborhood, sees the aftermath, sees the kids freaking out on the phone, jumps out of his truck, no questions asked. I'm not breathing, I'm bleeding to death, ties a tourniquet around my leg with his belt, gets my blood all over him. I recently told someone, we're so judgmental in this world, but this man didn't ask my religion, didn't ask my politics, didn't ask my sports team preference, didn't ask who I voted for, just saw someone that was in need and just went into action. The husband and wife would actually follow the ambulance to the hospital. I was actually airlifted to the hospital, but they would actually go and wait at the hospital for my mother. And so I was in a medically induced coma for 8 days. I was airlifted to the hospital. I lost 40% of my blood. They kept me in a medically induced coma for 8 days. They had to give me a trach because I wasn't breathing. When I woke up from a coma, I had suffered a traumatic brain injury and I had lost about 90% of my memory. And I was in complete shock. I didn't know what happened, where I was, anything about it. Certainly didn't know I was missing a leg. So I jumped out of the hospital bed in shock, tried to walk, ripped all my IVs out of me, and would face plant because I would fall on the end of the limb, not being able to walk. I would knock my top front teeth out, fracture a vertebrae in my neck, and ultimately the leg would get infected with gangrene. So about a week after I was awake, 2 weeks or so after the accident, they would have to amputate above my knee to save my life from the gangrene spreading. So unfortunately, a couple challenges, right away with the accident. I say a couple challenges as obviously downplaying the seriousness of it. Losing your memory
Okay,
is.
so before you keep going there, it's like you are downplaying it big time because, I've listened to your full story and it's like having that amputation have to move above your knee completely changed what the potential was in your capabilities moving forward with the loss of your leg.
Yeah, and I didn't understand that. The hospital had called a prosthetic company, and the prosthetic therapist, you call him a prosthetist, had come to the hospital, met my mother, talked to us. I was getting a little bit more coherent a couple months, like a month or two afterwards, and I had said, hey, I'm going to be okay, right? And he's like, yeah, we're going to make you a prosthetic leg, and all these things, and I'm like, what, like a wooden leg? Like I didn't know anything about prosthetic devices or prosthesis. And I said, but like the other amputation, I'm going to be okay. He was like, well, the downside is the most important part about being a leg amputee is having your knee. And now you don't have your knee. You lost your knee. So it's going to be a lot harder. It's going to be a lot harder to walk. It's going to be a lot harder to balance yourself. You definitely have a hard road ahead of you. And I do appreciate him not sugarcoating it. It sucked to hear that at the time. Like you're just so fragile. You're just in a very tough place. And you're just looking for any inclination of hope. And medical professionals, obviously I spent a lot of time with medical professionals. You have some that will set limitations for you. And I don't necessarily think that they do that knowingly. They're just talking about the risks and things that are involved. But ultimately, when a patient is at risk and looking to their medical professional for leadership and motivation, or looking for just
Hope.
hope, sometimes those things that a medical professional can tell a patient really makes them think that they have a lot of limitations. And something I realized after speaking to a fellow amputee was really limitations are what we set for ourselves. It doesn't mean that we don't have to do things differently, or just because, Marcy, you do something one way, doesn't mean that I have to do it the exact same way to the same activity. It might have to be done a little bit differently. You're a woman, I'm a man. Like, there's things that break down our process. But sometimes when we're in, that very fragile state, sometimes a medical professional trying to explain a safe way to do things for us sounds like a limitation. I'll never forget, I was about at the end of my 3-month hospital stay. I was in the hospital for 3 months. A social worker was talking to my mother and talking about our house and like what handicap modifications we have to make to our house. And I had a 2-story house. And as soon as the social worker found that out, she said, oh my goodness, above the knee amputees can't climb stairs. And like, I just remember hearing this, and I hadn't seen it yet, but my friend showed me pictures. I had a little wiener dog, like a dachshund. That was my dog. And the lady said, oh, he's not going to be able to go back to that house. And I'm sitting there, and luckily I'm the person, if you tell me no, I'm going to try and prove you wrong. But not everyone's like that, right? So I said, why is that? Can I ask why that is? She said, you just can't climb stairs. And I said, well, I have a wiener dog. My friend showed me pictures, and he's got like a little 4-inch legs. Like, if he can crawl up the stairs, why can't I crawl up the stairs? And her response was, you don't want to live like that. And I thought, wow, like I get it. Like, you're a medical professional, but like, how do you know how I want to live? Like, at that point, like 3 months, 90 days in a hospital. Like, I never knew another amputee. I didn't know what to expect. I mean, I thought life was over. I just want to go home. Like, I just want to go back to my home. I'd never been to these hospitals before. I never spent a night in a hospital my entire life. And so I just want to go home. I just want to be like in my own place, like with my dog. And this lady's telling me no. She tells me I'm going to have to get an outdoor shower because my shower is upstairs. I only have a half bath downstairs. And just how ludicrous is that to me? Like, I'm going to have to shower outside. Like, I mean, no offense, like I lived by a bunch of, cowboys and stuff, but I'm like, I'm not a cowboy. Like, what am I going to do? Be in a wheelchair outside in my backyard with a hose? Like, I just seemed it seemed like life was over. It literally seemed like life was over. I was a finance manager for a group of car dealerships. I worked 16, 18 hours a day, wore a suit every day. That to me was just all over. I mean, forget work. I can't even go to my house. Like, it was to that point.
Yeah.
And so in the end of my hospital stay, I was at a rehab hospital. And I'll never forget this. I had some good medical providers there, a physical therapist, occupational therapist, speech therapist. Every day was hours and hours of therapy. Speech therapy, because of my brain injury, was the most difficult. I'll never forget doing like math worksheets with the speech therapist. I'm someone who was always very good at math. I perfected my SATs on the math portion, not so much on the English portion, but luckily my math got me a great score. And doing like 2 + 2 was very difficult for me. I'm someone that I was doing college level math classes my sophomore, junior, and senior years in high school. That was something I was just great at. Obviously, my family, finance, sales, but it was just a struggle to me. And I'll never forget going back, in the hospital room at the end of the night. A couple of my friends would come see me. Hey, what'd you do today? They would ask questions about my day. Oh, I did speech therapy. Oh, what'd you do in speech therapy? Oh, we did math. My friends wanting to be supportive, not understanding how this affected me. Oh, you're great at math. What did you do? Oh, we did like addition worksheets. Come on, like addition worksheets? Like, you're doing calculus when you were 17. Oh no, I'm serious. Like 2 + 2 and 2 + 4. Like, what? And they don't understand that, and it's just making me feel pitiful. I mean, I feel really stupid. And so it was just a struggle. The trying to wrap my head around like the therapy or the physical therapy. They would want me to do like 1 pound arm exercises with like 1 pound weights. And I'm like, I'm missing a leg. Shouldn't I strengthen this leg? And no one at the beginning would explain why those things were important. But finally, I had a physical therapist, Michael. I'll never forget Michael Riker. Told me, well, the reason why I want you to do arm exercises is now you have 3 points of contact. You're missing a leg. So anytime you move, transfer, or pivot, you need to brace yourself. You need to have your one leg on the ground and your arms bracing yourself. You need to protect yourself from falling. I thought, okay, that makes sense to me. Why can't someone just explain that to me? Because before it was like, here's a 1 pound weight, do some exercises. And I'm like, why? Because I said so. And so, Marcy, I started to understand, looking back at it, I didn't understand at the time, the difference between someone that thinks of their profession as a job or a career. And while an accountant, maybe it's not such a big deal with an accountant or a CPA or your oil change, mechanic. With a medical provider, with certain providers, that's a big thing. That's a big difference, because it's so much more than just my physical healing. It's me wrapping my brain around why these things are important and why I need to do these little seemingly insignificant exercises. And so one day I had got my prosthesis. Never forget, it's like a little door hinge metal leg, but I couldn't walk, right? So I'm still in a wheelchair, but now I have a leg. I just couldn't wait to get a leg. Kept waiting for the day I'll get a leg. Thought I'd be boom, off running. Not so much. So I'm still in the wheelchair. Now I have a prosthetic leg. And to help me with my balance, that physical therapist, Michael, wanted me to get on a Wii Fit video game in the rehab hospital. And I, of course, my cocky young man, I was 28 years old at the time. I said, I don't play video games. I'm a finance director. I don't play video games. I gave that up when I was 13. And he says, okay, do you see over there? And there were two Wii Fit video games. Never forget this. And there was one older man, African-American guy, wearing like sweatpants, baseball cap, sunglasses in a gym at like 2 p.m, doing the Wii Fit. And he goes, do you see that guy over there? I said, yeah. He goes, when he's done, go talk to him. I'm going to go get those hand weights. Go talk to him when he's done. I thought, yeah, I'm going to go tell this guy that's stupid, that you're trying to make fun of him playing this stupid video games. Poor guy. It's probably why he's wearing a hat and sunglasses. He's embarrassed. No clue. So I wheel myself over. A guy gets done. He goes on like a stationary bike. I wheel myself over, me and my fake prosthetic leg I got now finally. And he's, kind of going away on his stationary bike. And I said, hi, sir. My name's Tom Mancuso. I reach my hand in. This man like looks up at me, kind of like sizes me up, looks up and down, reaches his hand out, and his hand is shaking. And I'm like, and he introduces himself as Muhammad Ali. He says it very loud and direct. And I'm like, I freeze. I don't know what to say. I'm like trying to see if it really is him. It definitely seems like the way he said it, it was very loud and direct. It was like, hi, sir, I'm Tom Mancuso. He was like, I'm Muhammad Ali. And I'm like, oh, crap. And so I didn't know what to say. I wheel myself back over to the exercise, bench that we were working at before. And the physical therapist comes back and goes, did you go meet that man? I said, I did. Is that really Muhammad Ali? And he says, it is. He comes here for his Parkinson's therapy. The rehab hospital I was at had a wonderful neurological department, and they did a lot of therapy for Parkinson's patients. And obviously Muhammad Ali had Parkinson's and I guess lived in Arizona. And so that's where he went for his therapy. And I said, so he comes here for therapy? This just seems like a normal place. And he said, yeah, he said, he understands that we're experts at what we do. And while he knows a lot about sports and some of those other things, he needs our help with some of these things. And so he leans on experts who know things that he needs to learn. And I thought, wow. And so I'll never forget that night. I'm laying in the hospital bed. I'm just like, woe is me, right? Just depressed. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, I just need to check my ego. Muhammad Ali has the biggest ego in history. If he can suck up his ego and listen to these people and take their advice and do the exercises they want, man, I gotta shut up. I just need to just check my, if life's over, if I have any hope of getting better, I need these people's help. Maybe not the social worker telling me I can't go home, but I need some of these people's help. They seem nice. They seem trying to help me. I need to just suck up the pride. I need to suck up the ego for a minute. And so that was kind of the turning point for me, really where I understood that, these people were there to help me. And even though maybe I didn't agree with everything or the way they were doing things, there were some good people there that I could learn from. And not that they weren't all good people, but some people that I could at least, understand. And they would teach me the right way to do things. And so that was really kind of a turning point for me. That was really and truly, I was very just depressed, saw no hope. And so that was kind of the turning point where I started to be a little bit more aware of, the actual recovery process, the physical recovery process. I was in bad shape. My right foot was broke. I had a boot on my right foot, left leg amputated above the knee. My left hand was shattered. I'm left-handed, of course. I had titanium rods in my left hand, no top front teeth, fractured vertebrae in my neck. I was in shambles. So somebody who was very aware of themselves and wanted to be the good looking kid, that was out the window because I was just in shambles. And so fast forward, I get released from the hospital. I'm at home. I'm seeing my prosthetic company. They're trying to get the leg to fit properly. And I'm still going to therapy. And my prosthetist, the guy that built my prosthesis, asked my mother if he could have another patient come talk to me. A fellow amputee guy, was a 7-year amputee, also motorcycle accident. And I was very resistant to it. I was so sick of talking to people about losing a leg. I just wanted to act like it didn't happen. I was just super depressed, overly medicated. This is someone who I had an addiction problem. I was an alcoholic. Now I wanted to stop drinking, but now I'm taking all these pills, all this medication, and it just was something that it was going down a road I didn't want it to go down, but I was just very depressed. Really dealing with grief, really struggling with grief. Not so much in denial, but I'm angry. I'm definitely stuck on the anger part of it. So my mother and like one of my really good friends convinced me to let this man come talk to me. Guy comes over with his wife, my friend, my mother are there in my house, comes over, walks in, he's wearing jeans, like a nice shirt, and his wife's there. She's very nice, she's pretty, like, and he kind of tells me his story, just starts, and I'm like, I don't want to say, I'm gonna do like one word answers, right? He's like, so how are you? Where are you from? Fine. I'm fine. Like, cool. Like, I'm just so depressed. And he tells me a story. He was in a motorcycle accident. He raced motorcycles too, was wearing full leathers, riding up to Prescott, like canyon rides. And he was leaning in a corner and his foot peg hit a reflector in the pavement and spun him out into a guardrail. And the guardrail was built out of like sheet metal and like sliced his leg right off. Boots, leathers, everything. He was doing everything right. Here I am. I wasn't wearing safety gear. I thought that was the only reason why I was in such bad shape. Not true. He's now an above the knee amputee, just like me. Same thing happened to him, even with safety gear. And so he tells me the story, and I'm like, oh, okay, like, so what do you do now? And he's like, oh, I work and we're married. And I'm like, oh, well, you guys were married before the accident, right? Because what woman would marry a guy with one leg? That's what I'm thinking. I was single at the time, figured might as well just hang up, get married, right? What woman would want to marry a guy with one leg? And so just very shallow, obviously. And so she looks at me and she says, no, actually, we were friends before the accident, but we fell in love afterwards. And I was kind of like, oh, that's kind of a BS answer, right? And she kind of sized me up big time. She goes, Tom, just so you know, good people, especially good women, they don't care what's on the outside. They care about what's in here in your heart, and they care about what's in your mind. That's what good people care about. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm definitely going to make a mental note of that. And so he turned around and he started saying, no, I went back, I own a granite tile company. I drive a forklift. I lay granite tile on countertops every day. And I'm like, oh, wow, like you do all that with one leg? And he's like, yeah, it took me a little time. He goes, but you can still do things that you used to do. You just might have to do them in a much longer way or a different way. And I'm like, oh, like the stairs, because they're in my house. I'm like, the stairs, like the lady told me at the hospital, I can't go up the stairs. And I'm like, but I've been scooting up the stairs on my butt. Like, I don't want her to know that. And he's like, yeah, I mean, you have to be safe. Like, you shouldn't hop up the stairs, but you can do it safely and you can still go up the stairs. And I was like, yeah, like, wow. Like, that was the first time I was like, there is a way to do things, even when you're told no. Like, you can find a safe way to do things. Like, life maybe isn't totally over. I just need to be smart about these things. And so that really, that patient's visit to me really showed me that what's possible. And I look back at that and it's kind of like, in our business, I have a new loan officer that starts. What? We help them, right? We don't just give them books and material. We also talk with them. We help them. We put them with a mentor. We walk them through the process because that mentor, that teacher will give someone the cliff notes, the real world cliff notes to the process. And that's, as I look back on these things, that's what that patient did for me. He gave me the cliff notes of how to survive and live a fulfilling life as an amputee. Even though I didn't think it was possible, he gave me some very basic lessons of, you can do things that you used to do. Just look at the actual process. How can you make the process safer or adapt the process to now your physical state? And so that was really a turning point for me to really let me know that, what, limitations are kind of BS to let other people set for you. The only limitations that we have are what we set for ourselves. So I was like, whole new world. Let's see how far we can push that. I'm going up and down my stairs. Like, what else can I do? I kept doing therapy. I started getting really, really determined to learn how to walk. It was very scary because they tell you if you fall again and hit your head, you're so much more susceptible to have another brain injury. So I'm definitely terrified. Anxiety, PTSD, depression are really still ravaging my body. But I want to try things. So I strap on rollerblades one day and I'll never
Oh
forget this
gosh.
day. My prosthesis is like a door hinge. Keep in mind, you had to walk and land on the heel so it would be straight. And if it wasn't perfectly straight, it would fall. It was like a hinge. And so I put on rollerblades, put on a bunch of pads, make my brother take pictures of me, but I feel alive. That was the biggest thing. Going up the stairs, I felt alive. Putting on rollerblades, I felt alive, right? I felt like I'm getting back to a little bit of my previous life. And little do I know that day, I have another reminder of my life. I get a letter in the mail from Superior Court of Arizona that my DUI I got before my accident that I basically forgot about was being sent for a felony charge because it was my third DUI. And so I got a very big reality check the same day that I felt alive. I certainly get grounded very quickly and realize that life I used to live had some drawbacks. And I definitely have a debt to society that I need to pay. And it's not just a financial debt. There's a much bigger thing that I've done and I need to make right. So I would unfortunately go to court for a little bit over a year and finally plead guilty to a felony DUI, an aggravated DUI. And I would get sentenced to 4 months in prison. And it was something that I tried. I'm going to be honest. I tried to weasel my way out. I would go to court with a cane, and I can walk. I mean, I certainly needed to be careful, but I certainly was milking it. And the judge at my sentencing said, "Mr. Mancuso, do you understand why Lady Justice is blindfolded?" I said, "No, Lady Justice, like what says, lady in the courtroom." And the judge pointed to the statue holding two scales, and she was blindfolded. And the judge said, "Do you see, Lady Justice?" I said, "I get where you're going with this. I understand. I understand that I need to make things right." And she said, "You will go spend 4 months in the Arizona Department of Corrections." She said, "Maybe they can make accommodations for you with your physical disability, but you need to go pay your debt to society." And so it was very shocking. It was one of those things that you try and find a way out, right? And it's one of those things that when somebody does something wrong to us, we want like the worst penalties in the world. But when we do something wrong, we want exceptions. We want leniency. Even though I put a lot of people at risk, I very much could have hurt a lot of people. And I would get reminders of this later in my life after I served my time. But I got sent to prison. I did 4 months in prison. I refused to go to a medical yard because it really got to the point where I was like, you know what? You didn't get the easy way here. You made a bunch of bad choices and used alcohol as a crutch while putting a lot of people in the public at risk. You need to pay your debt to society. You need to do it the right way. Don't do the woe is me. Don't be the victim. I wasn't the victim when I was caught, committing these crimes. So I couldn't be the victim when I had to pay for these crimes. So I would go serve 4 months in a prison in Arizona for some time for doing the DUI.
Wow. Wow. Your story, it just, I mean, seriously, it goes on and on and on. I could sit here and listen to the different aspects and the different lessons that you're actually teaching us as you're sharing your story, because you didn't have just the two angels that came to you at the day of your accident, the young 12-year-old boy that swore he was your best friend, right? And then the gentleman, the Vietnam vet that didn't even live in your neighborhood. He was just coming to visit. But then having the opportunity to be humbled a little bit when it came to the Wii Fit game and the Muhammad Ali, and having that experience with him. And then your friend, the other gentleman that has the prosthetic leg that came to share his story with you. All of these people were set in place to help you through this journey, but you still had the choice of whether or not you were going to be the victim or whether you're going to choose to take the lessons you were learning and be victorious in it. And I just see you today, and I think that you have become so victorious in your life. And yet going to prison, you shared a little bit in a video that I watched about how you were treated inside when you were doing your time by the other people that were in prison with you. And can you share a little bit about how you kind of shared with them? It's like, how are you treating me? It's like, how are you looking at me right now just because I don't have my leg? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, and so interesting. Like I look back at a lot of these, we all have struggles. Like when I tell my story, and it's interesting to tell all of these stories together because for the longest time after my accident, after my serving my time, I would begin volunteering with other patients and paying it forward, exactly like that man did to me coming into my house with his wife. I wanted to do more of that for other people. I wanted to pay it forward, right? And so as I look back at some of these trials and tribulations, I realized there were certain lessons that were learned. Definitely didn't understand them at the time. Looking back at my accident, I certainly understand character and how that man's character, the Vietnam veteran, the children's character, being 12 years old and seeing this horrific, tragic accident and still knowing to call 911, is very remarkable for a young child. And so I look back at these things, and then I guess my lesson from prison, and this is really interesting, is it's ironic, if anything, is integrity, because I go to prison, right? I'm amongst a bunch of criminals, and I'm put in a private prison. I have to go through a maximum security prison first. That's where they check you into prison. Um, Murderers, rapists, the worst people basically in society. You're amongst those people, and they kind of divvy you out to your prison you're going to serve the remaining amount of your sentence. And so I would get to a private prison in Arizona, and I really didn't understand the dynamic between like a government run facility and a private prison. But I would be there, and obviously you only have so much to do in prison. In Arizona, you don't have weights, so you have to do like body weight exercises if you work out. And then you have a library. There's really not much to do. They wouldn't give me a job because of my disability, which they didn't really understand was like more of a sentence to me because now I just had to hang out and do nothing. There's more drugs in prison than there's on the street. So I'm not going to do drugs. I'm not doing that. So I'm like, okay, well, I can read and I can work out. That's basically all I got. But as I would kind of be getting used to the prison itself, I would start understanding the dynamic that the privately run prison was run by $1 billion company that really wasn't into corrections at all. It was really just a profit center for them. And they would cheat the real Arizona Department of Corrections rules and policies to increase their profit margin. And so it was unfortunate, but things about just basic human treatment, whether they were inmates who didn't speak English or just, inmates who obviously had done something wrong and are there paying their time, just the way they were treated was something that wasn't okay with me. I'm there paying my debt to society, but at the end of the day, I'm still a human. I'm still an American. And while I certainly have given up my rights, I still shouldn't be treated anything less than a human. And so some of the treatment given to some of the other inmates, not necessarily myself, but to inmates that maybe didn't speak English or weren't fluent in English, the way that they were almost harassed. And this is not a political discussion about corrections or right and wrong. These people committed crimes. They're criminals. They're there paying their debt to society. But the treatment of how them and their families were treated was disgusting. It was disgusting because they didn't speak English and they had to ask someone for help. The person they asked for help and them would be put into solitary confinement because you're not supposed to help another inmate. If they needed to write a letter to their counselor or their case manager, it had to be written in English, but they don't speak English. They certainly don't write English. So somebody would help them. The guards would take all of their commissary possessions and the person that helped them, put them all in solitary confinement as a penalty, just things that were not okay. And so there's 3,000 pages of Arizona Department of Correction guidelines in the library. By law, they have to be posted in the library. I only have so much things I can do. I can only do so many push-ups, right? I walked 55 miles in prison. 11 laps around the yard was a mile. 55 miles I walked in 4 months. Like 20,000 push-ups, but you can only do so many. So I would start reading these guidelines. I was in the auto finance business, right? Like a loan, there's guidelines. So I'm reading these things and like things like there should be English and Spanish signage throughout the facility. That's nowhere in the facility was a Spanish sign. That's interesting. Why is it like that? Okay, and then things like you could take your shirt off on the exercise yard. I had seen people get rolled up to solitary for taking their shirt off. What's up with that? And so I would start understanding that there's things you're supposed to be given 3 hot meals a day. We would get a sack lunch for our middle meal of the day so they could save on costs and increase their profit margin. Like the bread would have mold on it. Again, we're not going there for the Ritz-Carlton meals, but still basic human needs. And so I would start seeing these things, but you could write letters to the Arizona Department of Corrections in prison. You could write it to your family, you could write it to your case manager, but you could also write it to the Arizona Department of Corrections. And so I don't have anything to do but serve my 4 months. And so I started writing letters. Hey, I'm reading this policy. Arizona Department of Corrections policy 61.42 says you can remove your shirt as a male on the exercise yard. Once you re-enter the facility, you must put your shirt back on. Why is it not that way at this facility? So I would start writing letter after letter after letter after letter. Finally, the Arizona Department of Corrections would come in about a month or two after I got there and do an audit of the facility. And the signage was like the least of their worst. They found out a lot of problems. The person who ran the commissary department was embezzling money, like a lot of problems. They're basically stealing money from the inmates. And so they changed a lot of things. Obviously, dual signage got put up. You could take your shirt off on the yard. All these things would change. But something I didn't understand about prison was prison is very segregated. And I started to learn that as I was there. To me, we all bleed red, right? We're all the same. Like, sure, we committed a crime. The guards are there to protect the prison and keep us, there in the facility, but they're human too. We're human. They're doing their job, nothing more, nothing less. Maybe some aren't behaving the right way. Inmates, obviously, we're criminals, but we're still human. And so I got pulled to the side one day by the head Chicano, which is of the Mexican race in prison. And he let me know that some people were going to jump me. Let me know that some people didn't understand or like the fact that I wanted to help everyone, regardless of their color, regardless of their creed or religion. I didn't find a difference there. I wanted to help as many people as I could. And I felt that most inmates forget a college degree. Most inmates don't have a high school degree. So even reading guidelines or policies, state policies, they don't understand that. Those 3,000 pages were rarely touched in the library. But I'm that person, right? I got to kill time. And there's only so much I can do in prison. I remember I used to get my hair cut like every 2 or 3 days. Like I had the perfect looking hair because there's just nothing to do. And so he said, look, I understand you're doing this the right way or for the right reasons, but not everybody agrees with that. Understand this is a medium security prison. So it's probably not a huge deal, but most of these inmates are from other prisons and you don't sit with someone of another race. You don't eat with someone of another race. You don't really hang out with people of other races. And you do all of those things. I said, but understand when I go get my breakfast in the morning, I don't have my prosthesis on. My prosthesis is electronic, has a battery. They would charge it in the medical department. So I'd be on crutches. Can't carry a tray on crutches. I would be in the line with all these inmates, lots of white people around me. No one would offer to help me. But a Mexican inmate or an African-American inmate would say, Tom, do you need a tray? I would say, yeah, go sit down. I'll grab you a tray. So they would bring a tray and they would put it at their table and I would sit there and eat with them. And I said, but those people help me. They don't care that I'm white or they don't care that I'm Italian. He said, yeah, we know what it means to need help and not get help. But also, you know how that is for us. None of us can write letters to the Arizona Department of Corrections. We can't speak the way you do. But you don't care about that. You do that for us. That's why we get your tray for you. And he said, don't worry. You have a lot of friends here. The nice thing was, for me, there was a lot more Mexican inmates than white inmates. So they made it very clear that I was not going to be touched. But it was one of those things that taught me integrity. there's not a wrong time to do the right thing. At the end of the day, if I was going to get beat up or stabbed, at least I did the right thing for people that just needed some help. And so it was tough. It's your freedom's taken away. You're told when to eat, when to sleep, what to do, and you don't know if somebody's going to stab you in the middle of the night. I mean, it's definitely a tough thing. My mother would come visit me. I would try and act like everything was okay. But luckily, I obviously served my time. Everything was okay. The warden himself walked me out when I was done finishing my sentence. My mom kind of laughed because the warden himself walked me to the gate and said, "Mrs. Mancuso, here you go," and kind of like smiled. And she goes, "Boy, you must have made an impression on him." I was like, "Oh God, if you even knew." And so I was like, "Let's go. Don't look back. Go, go, go." And so, I learned character from my accident. I learned integrity from going to prison. I know that sounds crazy, but it really teaches you about, life, and you make mistakes, right? You have to make those mistakes right. That doesn't mean that you can give up your integrity to do so. Just because I'm in a prison with a bunch of criminals doesn't mean I need to be a criminal forever. Doesn't mean that I need to give up or not help people who just need basic help. And so all those things, taught me lessons as I look back on them. I would get released from prison, really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I wasn't sure if I could go back to, the finance world. I was pretty sure I couldn't. And so as I tried to figure things out, I started my own business, a consulting business. I started volunteering. I wanted to pay it forward. I was free. I was getting those bad things behind me. I wanted to pay it forward like that man, Charles, when he came to my house with his wife. So I asked my prosthetic company, "Hey, if you have any patients that are new amputees and maybe they could be motivated by me, let me know. I'd love to go talk to them." So shortly after that, they called me. "Hey, we have a young man, 21 years old, was hit. He was in a motorcycle accident. I want you to go talk to him." Cool. Super excited. Okay. Still can't really wear my prosthesis well. I'm dealing with tons of nerve pain. I'm having medical complications, but I want to go help someone. Just the ability to give someone hope is all I need to hear. So I go meet this young man and his wife at the hospital. Young man was 21 years old, moved out here from California to go to the Motorcycle Mechanics Institute here in Phoenix, Arizona. He's a motorcycle mechanic. He was sitting at a stoplight on his motorcycle at 5 o'clock in the evening on a weekday, and a drunk driver turned left and sideswiped him and took his leg off above the knee. Young man was 21 years old, could just buy a beer. 2 young children, his entire life's changed because he was trying to go home. Finished his day at school, wanted to go home, see his kids. That could have been me, not him, the person that hit him, the person that changed his life. That was really, really tough. I remember hearing that from that young man, and I remember just breaking down inside because it was just something that was just horrible. Now this man has to deal with what I've been dealing with the past couple of years. He didn't ask for that. And it was a reminder of all those people I put at risk with my choices. They were choices. I made those choices. And so things happen for a reason, right? I feel in life, if we don't learn lessons, they keep happening to us. And so I had given up drinking, but I was taking lots of medication. And I just remember thinking, I'm just trading one addiction for another. I just need to change what I'm addicted to. There's more people like this young man. If I can give someone hope, just telling them my story, if I can just let them know that they're going to be okay. After all the crap I had been through, if I'm still here, they're going to be okay. It took me about 2 years to get my memory back. It slowly came back. They don't make prosthetic brains. So the memory was the major thing. Even if I could only walk or wear my prosthesis for an hour, I wanted that hour to be talking to another patient, being able to give them hope. And I would actually spend the next 10 years talking to patients. I would expand that. I would talk to medical providers. I would talk to medical students before they graduated their doctorate. I would talk to schools, colleges. I would talk to elementary school students. I would let them know what disabilities are, what service dogs are. I would spend as much of my time giving back to others as I could. I wanted to still have a reason to be here. I knew I had survived for a reason, and I didn't want to blow that second chance. I felt that the first part of my life, I had basically living as a taker. You know, what's in it for me, right? I don't want to help that person unless I'm going to make a bunch of money off of them, type thing. I was a nice person. I wasn't mean to people, but I had made some poor choices. And I felt like the reason for me helping others wasn't always to help others, it was usually to help myself. And so that life almost got me killed. I didn't want to live that life anymore. I wasn't sure where or how far I was going to go in life, but I at least wanted to be able to give somebody hope. No matter how bad or how stressful my life was or how painful my life was, if I could give someone hope by telling them my story, what I had been through, I would forget about my challenges, even if it was just for that hour. And just to see someone get hope from what you're telling them is just, it's honestly a miracle. To see someone who thinks that their life is over and they're at the end of their wits and they don't know what they're going to do with their life, to let them know that you've been through some serious challenges and they're going to be okay with whatever they're dealing with is a very powerful thing.
It
And
really
so,
is.
yeah. And so I would basically make that my job for a long time, of talking to others and being a patient advocate is what I basically created for myself.
So, is that what you would recommend for people that are finding themselves in a dark place, in the epitome of having that opportunity to either choose to stay where they're at in the pit and break down, or to do something different, focus differently, change their perspective, share their story with someone else, and focus on someone else's pain and help them through it and shine light? Um, is that what you would share?
I think it's one of those things that you can't be depressed or upset with yourself and share gratitude at the same time. So I think it comes down to gratitude. I guess I hit rock bottom so hard that I just thought I got nowhere else to go. Like I might as well try and like help somebody else. Like I just was like, I can't help myself. I can't really walk or walk safely. I can't even like go up and down my stairs like a normal person. I can't go back to work. I can't go back to my old job. Like my life is just in shambles. Like if nothing else, like at least maybe I can help somebody else. Maybe I can make them laugh. And so it really comes down to, yeah, like just it's one of those things that all of those visits and all of those talks with patients and other students and things like that just was one of those things that made me forget about my own problems, right? Like we can't be depressed and be thankful at the same time. Those two things, just it's oil and water. And so when you're talking to others and you're sharing your story and you're hearing other people's stories, we can learn from those things. It's the cliff notes, right? It's the cliff notes to life. Everybody deals with challenges and struggles. They're all very different, but the lessons that those challenges provide are very similar. All of us have undergone challenges and struggles, but most of us can look back at those and think we've lived through them. What have we learned from those things? We should share those with others. Just like the new loan officer who I mentor, I don't want them to go through all of my trials and tribulations and my failures. I don't want them to make the same mistakes I did. So I want to tell them kind of the cliff notes to those things and save them those challenges. I think the same is true with life, right? Like we all have lived a life and experienced things. It doesn't, we're not here to measure our challenges. We're here to compare the lessons. We're here to compare the cliff notes. What can we learn from other people's challenges? That I think is the most powerful. That's what I learned the most about um, working as a patient advocate is the power of community, right? Like the power of sharing our story and not dwelling on so much the topics or the challenges themselves, but what have we learned from them? Where we've come through those things, the light they say gets darkest before the dawn. it really is one of those things we have to understand. We've made it through those things. Look back at them. In order to win, you have to fail. It's those failures that teach us the most. Every loan officer that I talk with, I'm like, look, you're going to learn more from your losses than your wins. Oh, no, 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 no. That just upsets me and I get depressed. Yeah, but look at what you learned from it. You can't go back and change it, but you can change the future. You can learn from those challenges. And so that's kind of the biggest thing that I guess I learned from all of those visits and spending time with patients. But I also learned, and this is the most powerful thing, was no matter how bad you think you have it, or I thought I had it, somebody has it worse. I remember I would go volunteer at a disabled fitness center, a 40,000 square foot facility only for people with disabilities. And here I am walking, limping around the track, barely can walk around the track. And there's somebody walking around the track. Here I am thinking my life's over and depressed, got one leg. And there's somebody walking on the track missing both legs. Like here I am complaining that I'm not walking well. They have no legs. Like what? And then I meet someone who's playing wheelchair rugby with no arms and no legs. He's playing what they call murder ball with no arms and no legs. And here I am sad about myself. Here I am depressed. I used to hear the glass is always half full, but that's true. I don't care how horrible a situation is. You can look at the positives, and it's dwelling on those positives, not just the negatives, that makes the most difference. So being able to see those patients in their time of need in the lowest parts of their life really gave me a reminder that no matter how hard we're having it or how hard our life is, we have things to be thankful for. And it's typically we don't count our blessings. That becomes the biggest problem. We're all blessed. I don't care where you are. We're in America. Just the fact that we're in this country, it means that we're so blessed.
Amen.
But because we don't have a Ferrari or we don't have the $1 million house, we're depressed with ourselves. Like, how can that be? Look at the rest of the world and understand how fortunate we are. Look at the fact that I got my memory back. Who cares about the leg? Holy crap, I can sit at a desk and help someone buy a home, become a homeowner, experience the American dream. I don't need to go run a marathon to do that. Just being able to sit in a hospital and share with someone my struggles and listen to what they've dealt with and just be positive for them. That doesn't take me, running 40 miles. Who cares if I can go up and down the stairs? I'll scoot my butt all the time, And so really it just reminded me that someone always has it worse, and to be thankful for what we're given. Even be thankful for those challenges, because we're going to get through those challenges, and be thankful for the lesson that it provides, And so that's one of the most amazing things is all of these things that I did in my recovery have meant so much to me looking back on them. It's one of those things that you really do get the more you give. And that's something, I took that pay it forward, and I took that as far as I could go. And honestly, whether you call it karma or God or whatever it is, but helping fellow man, loving your neighbor is truly what it means. No matter how hard your life is, you can help someone, and that's the biggest reminder that I got from all of those things.
That's amazing. If our listeners want to change their lives, all they need to do really is just to change the first thoughts they have every morning. Change the first thoughts from what am I going to get today to who can I give something to? Who can I help today? And if you start focusing first thing every single day on who can I help today, your life will automatically change, because it is the truth. The more you give, the more you get.
Yeah, it's something I recently, I read something, two things. I read something by Brene Brown,
Love
just
her.
amazing, amazing woman, about when you get home, before you walk in the door and see your family, just smile. Just smile. Like, trust me, I have some tough days and I don't always win every day, but I come home and no matter how hard I've gotten beat, I'm a father now. I want my child's first recognition of me when I come in the house to be a big smile. I want my wife's first reaction to me to be a big smile. It's those things. But the other thing I read recently is when you wake up, instead of going to Facebook or checking the news, just think of things that you're thankful for, things that you have gratitude for. I look at pictures of my child or pictures of my wife and I just want to be thankful. I just want to be in that for a minute when I wake, when I start my day, just because just the fact that I started my day is a blessing. Gary Vaynerchuk recently said, just the fact that you wake up, that you're light years ahead of thousands and millions of people, just the fact that you woke up. And that's very important to me. This last weekend, I listened to Tim Grover give a speech. Tim Grover, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan's coach,
Yes.
trainer, Evan Wade or Dwayne Wade, amazing man. And at the end of the speech, at the end of the presentation, he wanted us all to stand up and put our hands on our heart. And I was like, oh man, my heart's calm, right? I just listened to this amazing speech. And he said, just so you know, that next heartbeat is not promised. And like that puts so much in perspective. I thought I'd die 100 years old in a nursing home. And at noon on a Saturday, that almost all came to an end. It's one of those things that we have to make our time here in this world count. And helping others is the best way to feel fortunate and feel blessed. And so it's the best reminder for me of that. I'm amazingly blessed of where I am now. And it's one of those things I look back at all these challenges, and while they were horrible to go through, fast forward, it's been 12 years since my accident. It's been 10 years since my prison time. I got my voting rights back. I got my firearms rights back. A lot of my volunteer work obviously helped that. But I didn't do that to get my voting rights back. I did that to help others. And in return, I was blessed. And so that's how life works.
Amen.
If you want something, go help someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Thank you so much. Everything that you have shared today, this has been such a pack full episode, and people can go back and listen over and over and over again. And every time they listen, they will pull something new out. And I will just tell you, if you are listening to this right now, take yourself some time and re-listen and just take some notes and just try to focus on maybe one or two things that you could implement into your life, even though your life is probably not looking like Tom's life was looking over the past 12 years, right? It doesn't matter. We don't have to compare, but what we can do is we can compare the things that we're willing to do to make a difference in the world. And if we can focus on others and what we can do to help them, that will be the very best step for every single one of us. So, Tom, how can the listeners follow you, connect with you, see what you've got going on? Because you're amazing and you're doing some great stuff.
Thank you so much. Find me on social media, Tom Mancuso. Find me on Facebook. I try to continue these things even on social media where a lot of people are negative. I try to post motivational content. I will say that though, I post my struggles, my challenges. I post my losses. Everybody's highlight reels on social media, not mine. I want people to know what my life is really like. But I also want people to know what I take from those challenges and what I gain from those challenges. A colleague of mine, my partner, my branch manager partner, built a YouTube page, a YouTube channel for me. Put my speech that you found out about me from on there. So hopefully we'll have some more content on there. I want to thank you for having me on. And I know we could have met in a different way with your past career and my past behavior.
Right.
Which is interesting. Really quick, at that speech that I gave, a man stood up at lunchtime, and he was a 25-year retired DPS highway patrol officer. And he stood up and he said something about like a nonprofit charity thing they were doing. But he looked at me and he said, "Where's Tom Mancuso at?" And I thought, "Oh, what's up with this?" He said, "I'm a retired Army Ranger, and I was a 25-year DPS highway patrol officer. And I just want you to know, you'd have been the first person that I busted, if you were driving drunk." He goes, "But I also want you to know you're the exact reason why we give people second chances." He said, "You've taken that second chance and you've run with it." He said, "In fact, you've taken that second chance and you've made it a whole nother life." And that really means the world to me. So if anybody can learn from my second chances, please follow me on Facebook. I'm not really big into like other social media, but Facebook or YouTube, or if I can help anyone, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear your story and and talk with you. Marcy, thank you so much for having me. Honestly, this is honestly a blessing. Thank you.
Oh, you are so welcome. You've definitely been a blessing to me as well. So, everybody, this is Your Fighting Life. What Now? With Tom Mancuso. You got to follow him, connect with him, and just share your wins and share the difficult times too. And I won't say they're losses because it's a learning opportunity, right? As long as we take it for that. But thank you so much for listening. And Tom, thanks again.
Thank you.